welcome to the CEC Report for the 3rd of June 2016. I'm Elisa Barwick, and on today's show we have a special report, Australia's Dairy Crisis and How We Fix It. Discussion with Alex Robertson, Vice President of Farmer Power. So I'd like to introduce our special guest today, Alex Robertson. Welcome, Alex.
Thanks very much.
And Alex is the Vice President of Farmer Power, which is a grassroots farmers organisation in Victoria. And he's joining us today all the way from Colac. So thanks for getting up early to do that.
No worries.
And we're going to talk today about the dairy crisis, which we spoke about extensively in last week's show. Alex organised the rally in front of the Parliament House, which we also attended last Wednesday. And today we'll talk about how to not only save our dairy farmers and our milk supply, but all of Australia's agriculture and industry. And as our viewers will be aware, we've been speaking a lot about the nature of the global crisis, and in particular the fact that we're facing a new global financial meltdown. And there's a quick update on that front. And that is that at the G7 conference, which was just held on the 26th to the 27th of May in Japan, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe actually spoke openly and publicly about the fact that there is a new, what he called Lehman shock in the offing, and that this can cause havoc across the world unless we deal with it. And he actually tried to get that analysis put into the final communique, which failed because the US, the UK, etc. refused to acknowledge that and tried to say everything was fine. But nonetheless, Japan is actually implementing a massive economic stimulus worth $91 billion, and they're going to put that into building and extending the trajectory of the new maglev train to go to Osaka and Tokyo and so forth. China has also announced a new program where they will put $750 billion into rail and road projects linking various isolated parts of China to major development in industrial hubs. So this is the kind of thing we have to be thinking about here as well. Basically, for 30 to 40 years, we have had a complete focus globally on all new investment going into speculation, into services and so forth, and making money out of money. And what we have to talk about, what we have to get a national debate about, is again having investment into our productive sector. So that's what we're going to focus on today. Now, Alex, you're a dairy farmer. Let's turn to the dairy industry and talk about the crisis. How long have you been dairying?
I've been dairying over 30 odd years since I was pretty much left school, so I haven't done anything else for the whole of my life pretty much. So yeah.
And can you explain, particularly for viewers who don't really have a handle on what's going on, because there's been a lot of crises in dairy in recent decades. But you described it earlier as a perfect storm in the dairy industry. Can you explain a little bit of what exactly is hitting the farmers right now?
Well, what's hitting the farmers right now is that we've been told that we're going to get a certain price for the season. And amongst that, we've had 5 months of absolutely no rainfall. So the cost of buying feed has been somewhat increased because we have no normal rainfall this summer, so it's been more expensive to feed cows. And we've got to the last, say, 2-3 months of the financial year and thinking that everything was going fine, and then all of a sudden one company says, hang on a minute, we've made a bit of a stuff up.
That's the processing.
That's the processors, and we're going to drop your price by 80%.
But not just the future price. Is it correct to say that they have revised the price going back?
They've actually, yes, that's right. They've made it retrospective for price for the whole year. So, for example, they've said that they would pay $6.05 a kilo for the whole year. Then got to February and said, no, hang on, we'll drop that to $5.60, but we guarantee we can hold that for the rest of the year. Then got to the end of April and they've said, no, we're not going to make that. We're actually dropping it to $5.47, and we'll have to get some of that money back because we've overpaid you. Now, just to show you we're not a complete load of idiots or bad people, we've decided that we'll give you a loan at 11% for the next 3 years so that we can keep the last 2 months' price up a little bit. So they would normally be getting around 7 to 14 cents a litre because of the drop. So they've offered a package to lift that up to somewhat 2/3 of where they would normally be for 2 months. But the farmers have to pay for that and over the next 3 years, which will be taken out of a pool. And they'll also be charged interest for the stuff up that they made.
And you'll be locked into that for that term of the loan, I guess.
Or you'll be asked to pay that out
if you leave, yeah, okay. So right now, most dairy farmers have a bill on the table that they have to pay back. This is the clawback, so-called. What is that going to be possible for dairy farmers to do? You mentioned that there's figures floating around of maybe 20% of farmers being forced to leave the industry.
They may be forced out because next year's price is looking somewhat lower. In fact, they're talking around $4.50, which is the cost of production is around 42 cents. So if they're getting down around 30 to 33 cents, plus they've got that loan on top of that they have to pay as well for the next 3 years, and they're talking about this downturn being 2 years long. That is almost certainly going to make those farms insolvent.
Yeah.
So
and
they can't get any more loans or credit, and yet the government seems to want to think that it can throw a loan their way.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to ask. That if the government provides these supposedly low-interest loans, it's really not going to. That's going to go straight back to the processors. The dairy industry is still going to be in the same boat.
Well, it just won't help them. You'll probably be lucky if only 2 or 3% of farmers will get that. They will have to be with rural finance to get it, and if they're not, they've got no chance. They're already 9 weeks behind processing at the earliest, and some farms are needing processing done within 2 or 3 weeks. So the $1,000 a fortnight government assistance package will do nothing to somebody who's got a $50,000, $60,000 grain bill that they're still owing.
Yeah, and it does nothing at all whatsoever to address the underlying cause of what set up this situation.
No, it's an insult.
Exactly. So what I wanted to ask you about, the price of milk. I mean, I had to fill up the car yesterday at $1.30. A day earlier it was $1.09. You know, we get... We pay a different price, whether it be bananas or whatever. But milk seems to stay the same, at least particularly if you're buying the $1 a litre milk. So how is the price of milk set? When they deregulated, it was a case of taking out a floor price and putting in a floating system based on the world market. So, which is fine if they stick to that. But the problem is when it goes up, they don't follow the market up so quick, but when it falls, they follow it down real quick. The other point is that with the price mechanism is that it's not based on what we can get, it's based on what they can get out of it themselves. Yet the price on the shelf will stay the same, regardless of where the world price goes. You'll find it on the shelf being the same all the time. So why hasn't the ACCC looked into this? They're obviously gouging when the price goes down. But the other silly point about this is that 70% of our production is sold here in this country, and yet 30% that is exported is determining the price of the 70% that's sold in this country. So why can't something be set up to take the volatility out of the market, given the fact that most of our product is sold here? We can stop farmers going to the wall, we can stop businesses going broke, and we can stop towns dying. Exactly. So what have you seen as a dairy farmer in terms of the price of milk over, the period of time probably that you've been farming compared to the input prices? I mean... Well,
we've got rates and taxes that are continually going up every year, wages going up every year, power costs going up every year. So everything's going up, but for some reason the government doesn't feel that we should have our price going up. So how is it affecting us? We're probably in a position now where we don't have cash flow which enables us to upgrade and maintenance our farms now. It's basically just a survival mechanism that's in, and what farmers are finding now is that they do not earn enough to capitally improve their farms to stay viable.
Yep.
And That's the problem.
Yeah, we can't have that happening if we want to continue to drink milk.
No.
And have a nation. Now, you also mentioned that you've been getting a lot of phone calls from farmers that are facing these difficulties, and what have they been saying to you?
They're saying to us basically, if a levy doesn't come in, they're as good as gone. They will lose their farms, and a lot of them are the young ones. And the problem with the industry is we need the young ones to come up and take over from the older farmers.
Yeah.
The older farmers need someone to buy their farm, and they simply will not have unless something changes. So we've got young people that want to get into the industry. Let's help them get into the industry and keep the industry going. But the government doesn't see it that way.
No, and that's
survival of the fittest, and we're not.
Exactly, that's exactly right. And we're going to talk more about the survival of the fittest mentality, the free trade, nexus that you're trying to operate within after this short break. You've been watching the CEC Report, the weekly TV show of the Citizens Electoral Council of Australia. What can people do to find out more, Robert?
Well, they can get on our website, www.cecaust.com.au, or they can call our toll-free number for Lisa to order a copy of this, the Australian Alert Service, which is our weekly publication where we write up all the material we use. That number is 1800 636 432.
Welcome back to the CEC Report, where I'm speaking with Alex Robertson, the Vice President of Farmer Power, about the dairy crisis and how to fix it. Now, one other thing I wanted to take up before we go into the solutions, when we're talking about the whole free trade dynamic within which you have to try and exist, one of the things you mentioned was that every state body of the dairy industry is basically funded by the big supermarkets. Can you explain that?
Oh, well, each body is funded primarily by each processor, which, so like Murray Goulburn or Fonterra, that all put money in. But along the way, in some way or another, the supermarkets are also funding them as well. They're a body they all get together and basically called the ADF, the Australian Dairy Farmers.
Right.
Why, I do not know, because they don't seem to represent any farmers, but they seem to represent the interests of the supermarkets and the processors more than they do the farmers, which they're supposed to. So that is one reason why we need to have a big clean out of the industry.
So you've basically got no bodies to really represent you, including your own co-ops that are basically floated on the stock market, and they have to answer to board members that are bankers and that are accountants and so forth as well.
Well, yeah, some are private companies like Saputo or Murray Goulburn is cooperative, but they also are answerable to the stock market, and Fonterra not so much. But the problem is that we do have representative bodies. They're just not representing us.
Yeah.
And they're not representing us because everybody's paying them money to put their point of view, and the farmers are pretty much told to jump in line and follow.
Yeah,
and as a grassroots organisation, we're saying, no, we don't like the way you run this operation. We want it changed.
Yep, so it's kill or be killed in this free
Correct.
market system. Now, you've proposed a levy on the milk price. Can you explain exactly how that would work and who essentially funds that levy?
Right. So when deregulation was first formed, John Howard actually created a levy that was designed to take the cushioning out of the volatility of the deregulated market. And that was a levy that was put on all drinking milk, and it was basically designed to, as a loan setup, that the government would take the money and pay the people, pay each farmer a certain amount out of that money so that they could get through the volatile times. Now, that was called a market support levy. It was de-enacted in 2008 after that, which was programmed to run. But what we're proposing is a reenactment of that program with the levy set at 50 cents a litre, based on the facts that it was all free of any free trade agreements and was negligible. There wasn't any re-regulation involved. It was just a case of putting a levy on the drinking milk. There was last year 9.7 billion litres of total milk production in Australia, and a quarter of that, 25%, was domestic drinking milk. So a levy on the domestic drinking milk would basically, once it was raised and redistributed to everybody on last year's production, calculated by Dairy Australia, would return an average of 11 to 12 cents per litre that the farmer would then sell back to the factory. So for example, next year, if the farmers are estimated to earn probably between 33 and 35 cents a litre and they need 42 to survive, that levy would add an extra 11 to 12 cents onto that 30 odd cents a litre, which would make them just over the line of being cost of production positive.
Right.
So that's how that would work. It would go for all farmers nationally in every state, and at this stage we're looking at it being on for 2 years until the market recovers or we get the industry straightened out. But it could be reduced or increased at any time, just depending on the market volatility at the time. So if the markets recover, it can be reduced. If the markets deteriorate, then it can be increased. And it would basically, the public support is out there for it. This is something that would be revenue neutral for the government. It would be very easy for them to do, and it would actually keep the towns alive, and it would generate more jobs and save towns and bring in more revenue for the government. So it's pretty silly for them to ignore it.
Now we've put out a press release about parity pricing, and this is something that was introduced in the United States and worked exceptionally well. And it's interesting how it worked because basically Pearl Harbor was hit prior to World War II, and there was a big push for farmers for this idea of a parity price, which just basically ensured that the minimum price of milk would meet the costs of production. And basically, Senator Henry Steagall, who our viewers would know as one of the sponsors of the Glass-Steagall Bill to regulate the banks after the 1929 crisis, he attached this Steagall Amendment onto the National Defence Act because basically, you had all the young men going away to war, and the industry was extremely worried, all across American agriculture, that this would collapse, and there was no more vital time to keep the American economy growing. And it ended up creating the period of the greatest prosperity in American agriculture, with farm output increasing dramatically despite the young men going off. And the farmers there described it as the equivalent of a minimum wage. And when you think about it, you can't get away with paying people less than the minimum wage across Australia today.
No.
So isn't this really just what should be the basis, however you implement it, that we need to have some minimum payment requirements?
Sure. These are all things that can be looked at. We've just looked at the levy at this stage to initially get farmers through this perfect storm, while other options are looked at. Our current bodies are not coming up with anything. They're just basically saying we've got to tough it out. But we can't tough it out. We need options. We need ideas. And that is another idea that we can add to the forum. So whilst this levy's in place, we can say, well, look, after 2 years, let's go down this path because we believe that this is a good option. The other thing with that is that, and a lot of people forget, is that a lot of the big tractors and stuff that we drive now would not be possible without some of those levies and things being in place. Because without farmers to buy them, it doesn't breed technology, it doesn't breed improvement in the industry. So we owe our life, our ability to produce lots of product and feed the people down to these measures, because without them, we wouldn't have rotary dairies, we wouldn't have air-conditioned cabins on tractors or computers that drive them. So that's something a lot of people forget, and governments tend to forget. They think that they just come on their own and appear out of nowhere, but they don't. They come from hard work and money.
No, well, the productive industries are the base of any nation, and that's what propels a nation. And as
Correct.
you said, it propels things like innovation. So,
Correct.
Malcolm Turnbull should be thinking about it.
You should.
Now, in regard to free trade, because we've also proposed a debt moratorium, you need to give a clean slate to get our industries going again, but also ditching free trade. And you described in one of your organisation's documents you were handing out at the rally, the dairy industry by saying this is not a free market, it is a feudal system with the processors as lords and the farmers as peasants. And you went on to say that if farmers were to give away their milk to consumers, you would be fined. This is extraordinary.
That's right. We have no rights. We have absolutely no rights in the industry whatsoever.
Because it distorts the free market, and the free market is where Coles and Woolies can basically, look at
Jump all over us.
roast chickens. They're undercutting each other, and
Sure.
the price is going down. Oh,
Sure.
the consumer should be happy because you're paying less, but who's it benefiting when the industries are being destroyed?
Well, it's not benefiting us. As I mentioned before, that there is just farmers have no rights at the moment. They can't stand up for themselves. There's that much power by the supermarkets and the processors, and they are frightened of losing it.
That's right.
So yeah.
Now that's unfortunately all we've got time for, but thanks very much for joining us, Alex, and
Thank
we'll
you
talk to
very
you
much.
again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome back to the CEC Report, where we're discussing the dairy crisis and how to fix it. And CEC leader Craig Isherwood is joining me to wrap up the show today. Now, Craig, you became political when you were farming and were walking into brick walls at every turn, just trying to improve your production and do what farmers do. What advice would you give to farmers about what they can do after the election, the long haul, after the rallies, etc.? How can we create lasting changes to policy?
Well, Lisa, it's not just farmers. This is a war for all Australians. This is the policy of free trade and globalisation, which doesn't work. The deregulation doesn't work. Alex mentioned that before. He's at the coalface of trying to keep, farmers, dairy farmers on the land, trying to keep our valuable production in place. The 50 cent per litre levy is, from what I can see, working inside this system to try and establish a parity price. And that's what we've been calling for 28 years. Unless you have a system within government, supported by government, that provides farmers with their cost of production, then you're going to see the sort of destruction that we continue to see in the rural industry. Now, yesterday I was walking through Coles, as I do, and I saw Weet-Bix, 100% whole grain wheat, $4 a kilo. But I know we've got wheat producers that are getting maybe $300 a tonne, and now it's going down again. But this is not $300 a tonne that they're getting now. They were getting $300 a tonne 20 years ago. Now that's $300 a tonne, but Weet-Bix are $4,000 a tonne. Why can't it be that the government, for example, steps in and says, no, we will pay our wheat farmers $400 a tonne. We will pay our dairy farmers 50 cents a litre as a parity price. We will pay our chicken producers X amount to produce chickens. The principle, though, is that you have to have a system which says we value our farmers, we value their production, we value the future generations of our farmers and the food security that they can supply. This is a radically different policy than the policy that's ravaging us today through free trade and globalisation. That's why for 28 years, we've built a movement through the CEC and other groups that have said no. And this is the solution. So it's not just a question of the farmers. The farmers can't do this by themselves. When you look at that, when our members go into the shop and they see $1 milk on they should shun it. Forget it. That is disgusting. Or the $8 chickens. And as Alex has reported, there's an enormous campaign, enormous grassroots campaign of people doing exactly that.
Supporting the industry, yeah.
And that's what Australians have to do. So if people really want to support the farmers, think about what they have to pay for food in order to support the farmers. And then look amongst the candidates for this federal election and ask them, how do you support our farmers?
Yep.
Do you support parity pricing? Right, what do you know about the dairy industry? Put them on the spot, because this is what's required. And anyone that's actually concerned about the future of Australia, our national food security, our farmers, then they'll very much stand up and say, I support these sorts of policies. Floor prices, parity pricing. Parity pricing is a solution. There's other different ways to get there. There's different mechanisms that we have to put into place. But that's really the sentiment here. This is actually a war, Lisa. This is not some nice little battle. We're looking at the future of our food producers here.
Yep, no, we've got to take the fight to the MPs, to our leaders. Educate yourself. Contact us for a copy of our latest Australian Alert Service. We've got articles on the dairy industry and the recent crisis. We've got articles on the history of parity pricing. Also go to our website, look at our campaign policies and so forth. You can subscribe to our emails to get regular updates on all this. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel to get this program every week. So thanks for tuning into the CEC Report. Thanks, Craig.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa.
And see you next week. you've been watching the CEC Report, the weekly TV show of the Citizens Electoral Council of Australia. What can people do to find out more, Robert?
Well, they can get on our website, www.cecaust.com.au, or they can call our toll-free number, Lisa, to order a copy of this, the Australian Alert Service, which is our weekly publication where we write up all the material we use. That number is 1-800-636-432.